So yeah, thanks all for coming and joining us this morning. So we are going to be talking about the first 90 days in a BD role and how to excel in a BD role from sort of day one, which is quite exciting. So I'm very happy to be joined by Robbie Pringle, who is currently Business Development Director at the Miles Agency, and Charlotte Fletcher, who's Business Development Director at April 6. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. Afternoon, technically. I always think these things are morning. I get confused. 12 o'clock, what to call it. So do you guys want to just give a quick introduction, like 30 seconds on you, your background, and who you are? We'll start with you, Robbie, if that's all right.
Yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, I'm Robbie Pringle. I'm, as Adam mentioned, I'm a Business Development Director at the Miles Agency. I've been in the business for 2 months, so I'm approximately 60 days in of the 90 days we'll discuss. But I've been in business development within agencies for about 6 years, mainly in digital at businesses, medium, small size. Yep, that's me very briefly. But yeah, thank you for coming and looking forward to talking through it.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for being here. Charlotte, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I am currently Business Development Director at April 6, which is an integrated agency. I'm specialising, in theory at least, on the technology side of what they do. They operate in 3 key verticals, so I'm on the tech team. And I've worked in business development. I was just having a little think, almost 20 years. But for a little career gap. So I'm fully BD institutionalized. So starting out initially at Rainmaker in a business development agency, focusing very much on the sort of lead generation side of things, and then more recently in design agencies, PR, advertising, and now fully integrated. So in theory, pretty broad. Great to be here though. Thanks for having me.
Right, no, that's good to welcome home. It's always good to have proper BD people on these calls, because that's kind of what BD Matters was all about when I set it up. So no, it's great to have you on board. So yeah, I wanted to sort of I guess when you get into a BD role, there's a lot of things that can go well and things that go wrong, and things aren't always as they seem when you take the role. And I think, we are often a bit of an anomaly in an agency. And so it's looking at kind of when you come in, it's around that how do you approach that new role? What does that onboarding experience look like? How do you build relationships with the people in the wider team to get your job done, which we know is all sort of really important. And then it's all around sort of the prioritizations, the challenges that you have to sort of overcome and implementing that strategy. So it's no easy feat, and I think sometimes when people we do take these roles on, they don't often know why we're being hired or what it is they're looking for, and I think that sometimes comes out throughout the course of working for people. But I guess if we just go backwards then, like what sort of motivated you into BD, which is where you'll probably tell me you fell into it and that's what happened. So if that is the case, then what kind of drew you to the company you're at now? Because obviously you've been doing it, like Charlotte, you've been doing it for like 20 years. So what do you like about BD? Why are you still in BD, and what drew you to April 6, that role?
Well, as you pointed out, yes, I did fall into it by accident. I didn't even really know what it was when I started out. But I do like finding out about people. I think being naturally nosy has probably kept me in that field for as long as I've been in it, and kind of the thrill of the chase a little bit as well. Like, it's nice to win. It's not always nice when you don't, but I think that sort of pace and everything always being different and getting to know people and trying to work out their challenges has been a really rewarding part of the job for me. April 6 in particular, well, I didn't really know a lot about tech, don't tell anybody. So when I heard that is what they specialise in, it just felt like I just had to go for it, and that would be a really interesting area to learn more about. It's the biggest agency I've worked for, which is we're 140 people. but also part of a much bigger group, which is really collaborative. So it feels like by quite some way the biggest team I've been involved with. So that's quite appealing as well. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I like it. 20 years in, you took the biggest challenge and took the biggest risk, and that's exciting. But I guess that's what true BD people are all about, right? Robbie, what about you? How did you get into this world and obviously into Mars?
Yeah, sure. So very, very much similar. Almost fell into it to a point. So I started in a media recruitment business. If anyone knows it, it's called Aspire. I was there for 3 years, and basically after those 3 years, I kind of had enough of recruitment, and the business development side is what I wanted to go into. And going back to your question about what do I like about it, I mean, it is echoing a lot of what Charlotte said. It's probably being kind of out your comfort zone for me at all times. You're always, the thrill and kind of things are always moving. It's always fast paced. There is a roller coaster to it, as always, like wins, losses, things go well, things don't go so well. I tend to tell myself sometimes that I'd love a really comfortable, easy life. But then if I was to do that, I'd probably get bored quite quickly. So that's the really exciting bit. It's always an exciting job. And also something that I've probably learned more as I've done more and more business development is being able to talk to people about not just kind of the services you provide, the specifics of where we're in agency and advertising and marketing technology, but also being able to have the conversations about the impact you have on that person and their business. So you're not just talking about the specifics of what this paid search campaign might be all about. You do end up having quite sophisticated kind of grown up business economic conversations with people, which is something I've feel like I've learned more of on the side accidentally almost. So that's what keeps me going and keeps me in it. The Mars agency was in all honesty, the first thing was I was in the north of the UK for 3 years, and I then wanted to move back to London. As you can tell, I'm not from the north from my accent. And the really interesting bit was I'm kind of the only, there's one other half business development person. I mean that by half their time. And so it's to take on quite an expansive role and have more of an influence over the whole process and be able to implement my thoughts and my theories and my ways of going about it. And it's again, like Charlotte said, it's a slightly new area for me. We are a shopper marketing agency. I'm focusing on growing the e-commerce part of the business. My background is a lot more in digital marketing, a lot more of that, the data side of things. So that was really interesting. And then for me, with always, when you're kind of going through that interview process, you can do as much reading and learning of a company as possible, but until you talk to someone and get the impression of what they're about, and the way they go about things, their thoughts, theories, for want of a better term, kind of philosophies on how they work, that's what really attracted me to them. So yeah, that's the few bits there. Yeah.
No, but even then, was it clear, I suppose, when you saw the role and when you took the role on, and I know you have to wear sort of all these hats in new business, was it clear what hats you needed to wear and what they wanted you for? And has that changed now that you're in the job?
Charlotte, do you want to go first, or shall I go?
No, you go first, Robbie.
Yeah, brilliant. So it certainly has. It's changed. It's definitely changed. I think that again, until you kind of actually get under the skin and begin, you are, like you mentioned at the start, you are a little bit not blind as such, but it's never exactly what you're expecting. I think for me, it was moving from, I've probably gone the opposite way actually to Charlotte, and I worked in kind of medium-sized agency. So J-Wing in the north is a sort of 300-400 person agency. And so coming to a business we're about 700, but there's about 650 in the US, about 50 to 100 internationally. So it's going to a smaller business with less of a marketing new business department. So that was the biggest difference for me, was that almost being from a team to being the only kind of new business person. And so that has its that was the difference. It was getting used to that idea of I'm the only one doing, not the only one doing it, but if you get what I mean, in a really simplest level, I'm the person that's doing this. So the really nice thing about that is, like I said, it's my input, and the business is looking at me to tell them how to do new business, which is great because I can influence it. The challenging bit is then that one of the challenges is having almost someone to then relay ideas from and get that kind of reassurance. A lot of it, I'm pretty 99% sure this is how we should be doing things, but sometimes collaborating with someone who's kind of in the trenches with you is really useful. And then it's probably something we'll come on to, but I think the managing expectations and the managing of what is expected is the really big difference in and also what's there and what's available. So one of the things is coming from a slightly larger business, you have a lot more processes in place, a lot more collateral and things like that. And again, that's all. It's always a double-edged sword, isn't it? In that not having it is a challenge, and you have to go and make it happen. But then you can influence it yourself. Whereas sometimes the frustration with a larger business is there is too much process, and to get something done, it's a lot of like, it has to go through this person, go through this person. Whereas now it's a lot more, right, this is what I need done. I need to do it and get someone to say that's okay. So it was, to kind of sum up, it was a very I was very aware of it, but then actually once you start doing it, it's a little bit of Christ, what have I taken on here? But it's a good thing. It's a really good thing.
Yeah, and I also think the business think the same as well. I don't think they always know what they're getting or who they're getting and what needs to change, I think, within an organization. But I suppose, what some of the things you talked about was kind of the pros and the cons of being independent and having this autonomy over this role, is that it's quite exciting in terms of the kind of the impact you can have on an organization, but then also it's kind of can be a bit daunting when you haven't got that validation and those other people around you and people who kind of speak your language to kind of understand what it is you're doing and what you're trying to achieve. And that's often why I've talked about new business being more of a culture than a team or a person. Like, we're only one of us. In many instances we are the only new business people in an agency. There might be you might have a team, but even as a team, if your team's 5, your agency is probably 5,000. So you feel quite isolated, and therefore it's about what impact do you have on the culture of the entire organization? How do you get everybody to work to help you, so to speak, rather than you work for everybody else? I think it's a bit of a shift.
It's a really interesting area, actually, Adam. I find, because I've had totally the opposite to Bobby, in that I used to be exactly that. If I needed something done, if I needed a case study, I'd write it, and then that would be how it happened. And so I'm learning the process and how I need to go through various different channels in order to get things done. But I often say that I'm part of everybody's team and nobody's team, because I am the only business development person who's 100% focused on it, and I sort of need to try to make sure I infiltrate everybody's departments so that they know what I'm doing and that I get the information I need out of them. But actually the sort of sounding board and the kind of building up a strategy, there's a point where the buck stops with me and that's it. So, but from my point of view, I think I was clear that there were a lot of hats that needed to be worn. Yeah. And I think the team here was pretty realistic about what needed to be done. I think the bit I sometimes find challenging is which hats are the most important ones to wear, and how to juggle different people's needs within the business. And certain people want to see more of one thing and others want to see more of another. Yeah. And there's only so much that I can achieve as a sort of individual, and trying to sort of get a real sense of clarity about what is going to be most meaningful for the business and most, reflect well on what business development as a department is actually achieving. So
yeah, because it's one thing that everybody has an opinion on, isn't it? Everyone has an opinion on the website or what direction we should be going in. And if you're in a big organization, or if there's multiple divisions, departments, and different people have different objectives on their own heads. So they're like, well, I want Charlotte to help me grow this part of the business, and I need Charlotte to help me grow this part of the business. And I think that can be quite challenging.
And setting good foundations, for instance, has been a big part of my first 90 days, which has taken me a lot longer than I thought it would because of the aforementioned processes that I haven't quite cottoned on how time consuming they would be. But you can have the most beautiful foundations laid in the world, but if your pipeline is teeny tiny after 6 months, you've got to try and get the balance right, which I think is I'm assuming that everybody feels this way, that sort of balance. It feels like it's always been part of my sort of the thing on the most important thing on my agenda is to try to sort of get it right on that front.
And has the role changed now that you're in it? Like, how's your perception changed of the role since when you joined to what it is now?
It hasn't fully changed. I think that, wow, it's a good question, actually. I think the bit that my colleagues probably think has changed is how absorbing it is when you're working on a live opportunity, and how when you're working towards a pitch, pretty much everything else can stand still unless you're really working incredibly long hours or really sort of galvanizing the team behind you. But I think we've definitely, I'm now 6 months in, so I think we've moved into phase 2, which is much more about, enough foundations have been laid. They're not perfect, but we're getting there. What also changed for me was that the person who hired me actually left after,
of course,
weeks.
That always happens. That's just
which wasn't a problem, but I think that also affected the onboarding to some extent, and it did mean that there's sort of a little bit of recalibration of sort of expectations and how it was all going to work. So I think as far as 90 days, probably my point of judgment might be more like 120, just to sort of give myself a bit more wiggle room.
I mean, new business is just a constantly moving platform, isn't it? New business, as soon as you've got 190 days out of the way, it's another 90 days and something else around the corner.
And as soon as client targets aren't hit, like client development targets aren't hit, that adjusts the new business targets. And so when you think you're doing great and everything's on track, suddenly you get an extra few 6-figure.
So Robert, I'm just curious to, I often ask this question. It's always been sort of my thoughts in agencies. How do you think the business development role is perceived? And you can answer that just in terms of like your colleagues, your bosses, the industry, because everyone's got their own. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think first of all, I think that every business I've worked in internally has always been, people are aware that it's essential, how essential it is, and I think everybody typically has the best intentions. But I think, and it's not, this isn't a judgment of slightest, but obviously if you're doing client work and you've got client targets to hit, and I come along and go, right, I need this thing done for this pitch, I need this forecast or whatever it might be, you can, whether they feel it or not, I can't sometimes feel, I'm being a pain in the ass to a point. So I think everybody has the right intentions with it. It's but then sometimes the day-to-day does get in the way. I think as an industry, it's probably perceived better than in a lot of other industries. That's the kind of sales piece, right? I think that a lot of other industries, it's a really almost dirty word that people use, and I see it actually in our industry as well. People tend to avoid the words business development or sales, and there's a lot of kind of changing titles to various partnerships, growth, or what have you. And personally, I don't feel like I should do that, because I don't want to almost give anyone any kind of misconceptions about what my role is, and that helps actually me, because if I'm jumping on a call and I'm growth director and someone's expecting me to tell them all about the specifics of a channel or something, and I'm there going to go, well, actually that's not my specialty, I need to bring in a colleague, then that does help. So I think there is a kind of I don't know how to put it, but there is that steering away from those titles, which I think is symptomatic of people are potentially aware of a slightly negative perception of business development. But I think that actually I've rarely encountered anybody being rude, negative, anything like that. So I think sometimes it can almost be a self-fulfilling prophecy that we tell ourselves. So yeah, I don't really have a particularly clear answer. I'm almost just ranting with
it's so interesting though. But I think like Dave kind of, it resonated with him in terms of like, when you're asking colleagues to go above and beyond. I remember going up to people and they sort of, be hiding under their desk thinking, oh God, Adam's coming. There's a pitch. They want me to do more work, because ultimately I think new business is always that. It's always more, the idea, it's about growth. It's about what's coming down the pipeline. So we're always asking people to go above and beyond.
I find, just to jump in on that, actually, I always found that the more senior people would have less and I don't know if anyone else feels this, but the more senior people would be more on your side, because they're running a team, a department. They've got their own targets. It's more people that are more middling. I don't know the actual term, and I don't mean that to sound condescending in the slightest, but and it comes back to what's their vested interest in it, right? You've got to almost turn it round to them and be like, well, you're, if we do really, you don't want to kind of patronize again, but if you kind of go to people and say, we win this piece of business and you're a big part of it, you always don't want to say that explicitly. That makes you look good within the agency, etc., etc. It can help you. That in that sense, there might not be a financial reward or a bonus coming down the line. So I think like it's being really aware of that, and if you can turn it, and it's tough, right? Because fundamentally you are giving someone more work, but if you can turn that into something that they can almost see why they're doing it and what's in it for them, that can help. And that's something. Sorry, I'm kind of again talking a lot, but the thought, if someone thinks of you just want to win this piece of business because you get commission for it and you get a hell of a lot of money, which is not really the case, then that's a misconception. Like but then I think that kind of feeds back into the types of opportunities you bring into the business. If they're good, if they're ones that they can see are right for us. But if you're just bringing in things that aren't relevant and trying to push people into opportunities that aren't right, that's when it can fall down.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it's all about understanding, isn't it? That they need to understand where you're coming from, that you need to understand what motivates them, that you've got the right target list, that everybody is going to get excited, hopefully, about the opportunities that you're making them work on. Even when it comes to sort of writing project write-ups for case studies, like, let's celebrate the brilliant work you've done, and making it meanspecific to them. But I make a bit of a joke sometimes, like, here I am again with my requests, and spending time with people when you can. I find it incredibly helpful to be in the office as much as possible. We do have a hybrid setup, but it's so much easier for me to just fire a quick question to someone who's sitting next to me rather than Slack. Please, when you have a moment, would you mind? You don't know what they're doing at that moment, and whether it's going to be an extra stress in their day. So I'm grateful for office time together. It really helps.
Yeah, so it is so important. We'll come on to talk about some of those relationships and how we sort of foster them. But I think you have to have that culture, and you have to have that buy-in from the leadership. And I think that's where it kind of goes wrong. If the leadership sort of don't get behind you and say, this is why Robbie and Charlotte are coming up to you, this is what we're trying to do as a business, and people aren't buying into that, then they do see it as just another job. Or if they've been given priorities that sort of push them in a different direction, they can feel quite confused, I think, and conflicted in how they should support you. But you're also telling me to retain this client, and where's the priority on their side? And that puts, I think, us as BD people in a tricky position when that person is being given two different messages from the leadership team. So I think that's where they need to sort of have our backs quite a lot.
Yeah. I also think and this is probably not quite right on my part, but I have definitely cottoned on to the people who are quite new business oriented in how they think. And so if I've got a few people of a similar level who could all help me, I know the ones to go to. And perhaps that's really unfair because I'm just adding those individuals' workloads. But you know, you can just see that some people kind of get it and they're commercially focused and they enjoy that.
So I had something similar. I had something similar with more in terms of when doing events and talks and things at my last business, that there were certain people that loved it and really wanted to go and do anything. So if I wanted to do an event or I wanted and I wanted it to get signed off, I'd get that person and be like, right, we're doing this event, let's go to X person and go, let's get it signed off because you can do it. So it's a similar thing that, like, whereas some people that's hell on earth for them, like standing up in a room full of people. So again, it's
finding your allies, isn't it?
Yeah, and also just understanding slightly away from just, and I think you have that almost that luxury in being able to, when you meet, talk with people, you can go into the specifics of a project, but because you're not their direct line manager, or you're not someone in that, you know, you can kind of get to know someone in the sense of, and you can almost talk slightly off the record with people in that sense, and in terms of, and find out stuff about them, find out stuff about the department, etc. That you, because you're slightly away from it, you can find out more about them and more about how people work, etc. And even sometimes I've had it where, you know, you kind of find out about their boss and they're like, well, no, they hate working like that. And you're like, okay, fine, I won't do that anymore. That's why they've not responded to me. That's why they didn't do this bit of forecast, because they hate this type of thing. So again, I think with a lot of what we're saying, and in my head, there's a kind of theme here that there's always this kind of double-sided to everything. There's real difficulties, but then there's also opportunities in all of the things we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump to that sort of question. We've kind of answered it already, but I just wondered if there's anything else in it. It's just like, you know, it's about building relationships with colleagues and stakeholders and people in the business, which I think is so much of the new business job. You know, I used to think of myself as like the cog behind the face of the clock, you know, like making all the cogs turn and running around. And it was more around sort of what was happening. And a lot of that was those relationships, and, you know, whether it was taking someone for a drink or even participating in company events and things like that, going out of my way to know that I was accessible. Because if you don't have a relationship with somebody, then how are you ever going to get them to collaborate and come with you on this journey, whether that be a pitch, a content piece, an event, or whatever it is? But, you know, are there any other sort of strategies or tactics that you guys have used, and have you come across any sort of particularly difficult personalities or pushbacks where you've had to work that through?
I think from my point of view, spending time with everybody in the early weeks and months was really meaningful. Like to just go for a coffee with anybody that would be willing to have a coffee with me. I was very caffeinated by the end of the first few weeks.
Yeah.
But higher the kite. But that was quite helpful, and being quite explicit with saying, I'm going to be coming to you with lots of requests over the coming months and years, hopefully. What's the best way to do that? Which days are a nightmare? Are there points, you know, do you prefer shall we do a regular thing and see if we can make that work? Or, you know, are you happy with ad hoc? So just kind of trying to accommodate people's preferences as much as possible. And I would say that probably more than difficult personalities, because actually I'm really lucky. I do feel like I've got such a great team of people. It's more like intentions getting swamped by a heavy workload. So there's lots and lots of good intentions and people willing to help, and then things get in the way. So it's more about not that they don't want to be supportive, but that other things take precedence. So it's trying to push BD up their priority list, because it's always going to be at the top of mind. And I think, you know, I'm not quite sure I've completely got the answer to that. It's just finding a way to nag in the least offensive way to try to make it happen, and be friendly and empathise and make sure they understand why and all of those things, you know, the context, the understanding. But you're right, it's the ongoing challenge, isn't it, of how to be chief botherer and still.
I think you're spot on, absolutely spot on with the idea of finding out things like which days are useful, etc. So and real kind of practical things. So for example, when you say that, I remember someone like my boss, I can't remember who it was, but someone had kids, and it's like between the hours of like 3 and 6 they wouldn't answer anything, but then they wouldn't mind if at 9 o'clock at night I WhatsApp and go, oh, can you do this? So it's fine. I mean, you're never going to find it all perfectly about everyone, because but find out like simple things like, what's the best method of communication? Like, do you like Slack? Do you like email? Because my manager replies a lot, but he never replies on Slack. But if I email him, he'll reply.
Yeah.
And that's the same kind of within the business of how people prefer to be communicated with. Yeah. And also to kind of a bit of a practical thing as well, when things like, or the thinking behind this, what I'm going to say is like, a lot of the time I just need information from people, right? I don't need it put in a pretty way. I don't need it designed or whatever. I need what's in your head. So if you say to someone about a case study, they might think, they look at the case studies you've built or that go on the website and they're all flashy and the rest of it, and they've got all the information. You don't need that. I need you to tell me the results. I need you to tell me what we did in just brain dump it, and I or me or marketing or whoever can make it look nice. And so there might be sometimes mini kind of templates you have for things like case studies, where it's like you send that, what do we do, etc., where it's really simple for that person to just put the information. And it's the same when it's like events, or if they're if we're doing kind of content that we're doing with like a campaign or whoever, or a thought leadership piece. I don't need it in perfect. I don't need you to write it. I need the information. Yeah, and another little thing as well is getting people on side. Is really, it actually comes back from days of doing recruitment years ago, was that you just tell people you're the expert in this, and almost flatten them a bit and be like, you know this much better than I do. Like, tell me more about this. And then people like to, one, be flattered, but also if you get them talking about things, that worked back in recruitment days, and it seems to then, rather than being, it seems to put you kind of on a slightly different level, like you're this humble person telling someone that you want their information, and then I think people tend to be slightly more open to give it to you.
Yeah, I think they're both great advice. I think you've got both the emotional side of it, the psychology of people and understanding them, and then at the end of the day, you've then got the process side of things. How do you make it easier? How do you get that information out of their heads? And I see so many missed opportunities. I literally just came out of a workshop now with a client, and they're having a meeting to try and get all the client teams to talk about what are the client challenges they're seeing at the moment, right? Now, they're going to write that down, and that's going to come part of a brainstorm to feed into content. But you have to remember, every time someone speaks, they're basically relaying a client challenge. Well, that could be transcribed into a LinkedIn post. Every little opportunity is an opportunity to create content or do something with it. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes I see a lot of meetings for the sake of meetings, and actually the meeting is a blog. You've written a blog just by sitting around chatting, or things like that happen. I think that's where you've got to get smart as new business people, is the processes, and actually realize that there's gold everywhere that can be used, and we're always struggling to get more content, but actually it's actually happening all around us. So it's how do we just get that through a nice sort of process into digestible format.
Yeah. And I think that's with the content side of things. Sorry, Adam, is that a lot of people, again, they think that when you talk about content thought leadership, it needs to be a long thought through piece of content, and that's the perception, because stuff you see on the marketing week or whatever is like a long thing, but you're spot on with, like, actually, if you just give me a nugget of information or something, that's a LinkedIn post that we can do through me, we can do it through the business or what have you. Just relaying this stuff that because you guys are hearing it all the time from your clients, and you're right, and I'm trying to master this at the moment where I am. What's the best process to do that, to just where people can just brain dump?
Yeah, I think it's that worry filter. Everyone thinks, when you say thought leadership, they think, oh God, I'm writing for The Economist, and suddenly my piece has to be good enough for the Times. And you're like, we're just trying to win new business, guys. Like, we're just trying to relay that information. And I think trying to keep it simple is the best format.
Remembering it doesn't have to have universal approval. It doesn't need to, it needs to appeal to some people who have that specific need. And if other people, it is difficult, because our strategy director, who is really brilliant, is naturally inclined to want everything to be completely perfect.
Oh yes, yes.
And
The
that's really
strategy teams are, I think, one of the hardest in the new business world to work with. I would say
that's
And
really funny you say that.
needed so much, but hard to simplify decks and get thought leadership out of, because you just need this. You don't need War and Peace.
Yeah.
Go on, Robbie. What were you saying?
No, it's just because with when you descend, when people think it has to be kind of perfect a lot on it, it's if it's something like you said, it just needs to resonate to the right people, and it's not going to offend anyone. And if you think about when you're scrolling, not even just your own LinkedIn, but even any social media, any websites or anything, if it doesn't really appeal, you don't really bother. You just don't care. Like, so you're not gonna. I would kind of tell it. It's not gonna. There's no negative if it's not perfect. Put it out there. No one's gonna. It's better doing that than not.
Yeah.
But talk to me about the strategies you inherited or lack of. Like, what did you do to kind of dissect the current new business strategy and put in place a new one in those early stages? Charlotte.
Well, I was sort of new to it was kind of a new role. There had been a business development director before me, but there had been quite a big gap, and he had focused primarily on the PR side of the business, whereas I was the first time to have someone doing the full integrated kind of job. So I didn't really inherit a strategy at all. It was very, very open, and even as much as sort of getting a really good target list or a real sense of who we should be targeting and what made a perfect fit was like, it was real kind of back to basics stuff. What are we saying? Who are we saying it to? How are we saying it? And so, that would always just be my approach, to just make sure we've got answers to those things. At the same time, I'd got change in leadership. We were waiting on a new brand, which only launched in June, at the beginning of June. So, but we knew it was coming, and it was supposed to be March. And these things with agencies, you're always doing it for your clients, but it always gets pushed back for your own, But so there were lots of sort of things that were making everything a little bit hard. So I think, really, it was trying to kind of get as many answers to the kind of core questions, whilst also getting a few things going, a few little tactical campaigns out to some key sectors where we knew we were good and we knew we had a really strong offer. So it was just that was kind of my approach for the first 90 days, to try to get the right balance of a little bit of activity alongside trying to get some answers, whilst not doing too much, because it was all going to have to be rebranded in who knows when.
Win new business, but don't go, but everything's going to change in 3 months' time. So
sometimes you just sit there with a blank page thinking,
you're like, okay, so you want me to go that way and that way at the same time. Cool. Robbie, what did you?
Yeah,
mine's
very, very similar, actually. So I think that it's very symptomatic, just going back to the idea that what you inherit is probably not what the business thinks it is. At my last business, it wasn't me actually, but my boss at the time, who was the commercial director on the board, this is about 3 years ago, or maybe when he joined 4 years ago, he said the same story to me. He was like, yeah, when I joined, they thought they had loads of leads, etc. These aren't leads; these are just people that have got on our website or something. So I think it's quite symptomatic that when you're talking to in that kind of interview stage, and what you actually inherit isn't as well-rounded as you'd like. So very similar to what Charlotte's saying, is to look at the fundamentals and the luxury again of being that person is I get to have a say on that and what we're saying, etc. But I think the difficulty with that for me so far is making people understand there's a very big difference between what we say and how we talk to our clients and what new prospects we're saying to them, because it's a totally different beast. They know who we are. These people might not. So we have to be a bit more punchy and that sort of thing. But again, it's very similar to Charlotte in that being able to kind of run those two lanes of, okay, we need to build a process, but also have some embers of things that are actually happening, activity and leads. I wouldn't go as far as say 60 days, and we're kind of pushing on a couple that might turn into opportunity, but some warm leads happening. And I think one thing I've realized that in this particular role is very much that it might be me personally, but in general, you can want to have a real kind of ideal plan, etc., and everything kind of written down and a perfect thing. Right, this is how we're going to do. And sometimes it's just a case of I get on with it and do it, and then you find out a lot more by actually like making mistakes or not, or doing things well. So it's it's fun because there wasn't a huge amount. A little bit was me finding out, okay, what have we got, what content have we got, what creds decks have we got, what case studies have we got, and so then the next bit is right, so how do I get them? And also, at the same time, trying to do as much as possible to almost prove slightly to the business that, yeah, I'm not bad at what I do, and there's a reason you hired me.
Well, that's it, and I'm just interested to see how you prioritize those first few months on the job, because there's a lot of moving parts there. So I guess were those priorities given to you, or did you kind of look at the picture and go, hold on a minute, like this is what needs to happen, and what were those things that you prioritized?
I had to actually do a presentation on the first 90 days as part of the interview process. So I had my slides at the ready, and so yeah, I mean, it was pretty much self-driven, and because I was the only person in that role, and that they were sort of hiring me to kind of know, I guess, and it seemed to tie in with what they were looking to achieve, and which is, can we have a pipeline, please? That was, I guess, is the summary of the targets. So yeah,
I did something similar in my interview. Actually, it wasn't a first 90 days as such. It was something along those lines. So that's actually quite helpful because you've done that exercise already. Mine was I was lucky in a sense that my second week we went to an event, Shop Talk in Barcelona, and again, this double-sided bit of it was that I was thrown into some meetings in week 2, like the speed dating kind of meetings. Yeah, okay, fine, I'll give it a go. And kind of talk through them. And so there was, that was really daunting. But then also there was almost like a few bits and pieces to be getting on with straight away. So I was quite lucky in that sense. There's follow-ups there, there's conversations I've had. But again, exactly the same thing of it was kind of the targets, the actual what we're going to do is driven from me. But I think that's very much what the business is, and that's what they said to me before coming in. Like, you're almost like one of the first hires in this position. This is what we're looking to you to kind of come from, which for me was great, because then it's a case of using something that I've been doing. It's got the core fundamentals of business development for 10-12 years, rather than being able to, you've got experts in the specifics in the business of what they actually do. So I really like that I've been able to take the kind of core fundamentals and bring that into the business.
And were there any sort of like goals you had for yourself, or did the company have on you? Like, are there any kind of success stories or achievements in those first days that you're quite proud of? Because obviously these were new roles and everything's kind of new. So, what were you able to achieve in a short space of time? Not necessarily in terms of wins, but just in terms of what we would look at success as.
I think for me, there's an opportunity. So we're a shopper marketing agency. I'm focusing on e-commerce. We've also got like a tool that we use on Amazon called Analytic Index. It's actually a company that we bought, very driven out of the US, and using that, there's an opportunity that's gone, and it's helped me find like the level of business that this tool's right for, because it's quite an in-depth tool. And it's kind of more luck than judgment, but that came about, and I suppose I think what I feel has gone relatively well is jumping into things, these kind of things that I'm not massively kind of knowledgeable on, and just going, sod it, let's do it, and what's the worst that can happen kind of thing. So, and they're turning into things that might be opportunities and proposals down the line. So that's something that 60 days in, I think, has gone quite well, and it's because it's quite easy to be quite, I don't know about this, I'm only 60 days in, like I don't know loads of people, I need someone here with me or whatever, and let's go for it, and that was backed by the business. They sort of said, yeah, go for it, like, or that sort of thing. So that's been really positive from my side.
Yeah, well, I guess that's just, using your intuition to kind of spot where the opportunities, are. Charlotte, have you got anything that you're proud of that you've implemented in the first 90 days? Any KPIs on you or anything like that?
Well, I think we were quite focused on a few incoming opportunities in the first 90 days, which was a really nice position to be in. And we won some and didn't win others. And so whilst, you always do want to feel, the win is always a big way of measuring it. I think for me, the sort of personal successes are probably more to do with getting their new business culture in place and getting
digital currency for this exchange.
Team activities happening around business development and working with the sort of senior
crypto only, mate.
teams and getting them on board and working together on opportunities. And that's something that's never really been done in the company before. So that's been
what a load of malarkey.
Something that I feel is making a difference that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't.
Less malarkey, more smarty. Search Smarty Mobile.
Will get processed quite well, and we've got a good creative. There's sorts of things where I'm feeling like I've been the difference rather than this has been a success that we've all kind of.
Can I just jump in? Actually, I'm almost like that with you. Like the wins are really great, but I almost get a little bit more out of seeing that process happen. So the actual,
it makes it feel like there'll be more, doesn't it? Because there's always that point in your head where you think, well, what happens after that pipeline has seen, gone through, after we've gone through that process with them, what happens next?
Because the win as well is often a team piece, and you play a part, obviously, but actually in my last business, it was usually the actual pitch process, depending on the size, was done by other people. But it's seeing, and it sounds so sad really, but having a healthy pipeline is like, and looking at it again, yeah, this is great. It's not actually the win that makes me really excited. It's like, right, this is all happening, and this is all this bit before, and I think what I'd love to get to in a few months' time is to be in that position, and building that's the really exciting. You've been doing it too long when you get excited about that, and not.
I mean, you can't be in PD and not get excited about pipelines. I mean, you're definitely in the wrong job if you're not excited about that.
I love it.
I think what's interesting.
I feel on the CRM yet.
Yeah, well,
I'll spare you
we'll come on to that next. But I think you both kind of inherited, like what we said, is like a bit of a moving ship, right? There's nothing standing still. There's live opportunities. There's things going on. So I think at this one point we're having to sort of jump on board this moving ship and try and go with it and take it in the right direction, but as well as thinking about the longer term strategy. And I guess it's easy probably to get sucked into the now and the day to day, and not stop to think, hold on, where do we want to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year, all that kind of thing? Because you don't come into like a standstill, right? Let's just spend months thinking about the direction of the company. There's shit to do. So just thinking about tools, you mentioned sort of CRM there. What are there any new tools? No, I love CRMs. I'm that sad when it comes to when we talk about tools, like, are there any things that you've either implemented, inherited, things that have helped you in the early days, or things you can't stand? Talk to me about tools.
I mean, HubSpot, it was the CRM that I tend to use, and we already had it in the agency, but it's not been used universally, and it's tended to be used for sort of one-off mail shots by the various different global territories, and trying to sort of make that part of the new business process, and that people's networks are kind of managed from that has been, it is still a work in progress, to be truthful, but it is moving in the right direction. I think we also tend to use Slack. I know everybody has their own thing, but having very specific groups that are like, I've got a new business steering group, and that is also really useful for making sure if I've got a quick request, I can put it out to about 6 different people, and hopefully the person who's least busy will get back quite quickly, so that you're not just relying on one person. And just trying to be organized and have an inventory and make things efficient and make sure that everybody knows where everything is stored, and gathering together, team biographies and boring but important things that you've then got there, so that you can respond to opportunities really quickly because you've got all the material ready to run. And I think I was working on one really big RFP in the first, I was probably about 6 or 7 weeks in, and we didn't have any of that stuff. So every part of the RFP was a slog. And so trying to kind of get to a point where that won't happen again, because we've now got files where, you know, people who start have to fill in certain information about themselves so that we've got it all there, and I'm not, you know, at 11 o'clock at night desperately trying to find out where somebody went to university or which clients they've worked on in the past. It's definitely
I feel you. No, it's important. What about you, Robbie? Any tools and
It's
things?
the only thing that we used in my last business that was a colleague of mine used to use more than I did. It was called FlipSnack. I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but it's basically it's not expensive. You put a deck into it, and it basically turns it into like a photo book. So rather than someone seeing a PDF, they get a link. They click on the link, and it'll just go through each page. It's there might be better ones out there. I haven't used it extensively, but it's quite a nice. It first of all shows that you've given an individual link to that person. You know, you're not just if you're sending out like the same, maybe, I don't know, whatever method, a document to certain people. They'll have their own individual, because you can individualize it, etc. But it also has the stats on whether they've opened it or not. And one thing, like, so you can see how many pages they've viewed. And one thing, as I'm sure you can all guess, is that the page views go number one quite high, boom, straight down. So it taught us, like, you know, I'm doing when we were doing it, it was in my last business. After 5 pages, don't bother. Like, nobody's reading those. But it's a slightly nicer way. Any PDFs you're sending to people, that's quite nice. I think that's the only one I'd use that isn't a HubSpot or a Sales Navigator or anything like that. I've used the kind of intelligence tools before, Pearl Finders, Alpha, and those. Pearl Finders was quite good.
Yeah.
I've not got it in this business, but last business we had it.
I use Pearl Finders actually. Because
I don't, their emails they get, and I'm sure because I've not used it for a while, but I'm sure you can get it so it's kind of personalized to you, so you get it. Because I always find with these tools, and I worked at e-consultancy before I got into agencies, and it was like a platform subscription, and I always find that actually, unless you can kind of insert it into your day-to-day, very rarely is your first thing going to go, right, I'm going to go on Pearl Finder today and find the news. And I was going to do that. You need it kind of sent to you in your inbox. And I think you can get it. So you get the ones I'm focusing on, the automotive vertical. Here we go. This is what's going on there. So that can be useful.
Are there just then, because we're going to have to wrap things up shortly, just looking back then, having now sort of gone through the onboarding and into your roles now, if you're looking back, are there any things that you would have done differently now that you know, or any sort of lessons or insights that you've gained from that onboarding? If someone else is is about to start a job or is thinking of implementing a new strategy, what would you have done to help yourselves better?
I definitely would have done certain things differently, for sure. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I think this is very personal to me, but I think I was taken aback by the layers of process that I needed to go through, and I think I was naive to that. So I think anybody going into a larger organisation from a smaller organisation, just check in who needs to do, job numbers need to be set up, and time sheet, and all of these sorts of things that were a bit of a shock to the system for me. And I think that would have made life better, and I would have had, there were a few false starts on certain things that probably wouldn't have happened. And then I think getting the sort of regular catch-ups in the diary with the key people and diarising those and forcing the issue and actually asking about it in an interview, like, will the team be willing to do this with me? Because this is a non-negotiable that we have to actually have time together with whoever it might be. I think sort of putting it out there from the word go that it's not going to work if you don't get to spend time with the team. So
yeah, okay, nice. Robbie, what would you change looking back?
I think for me, probably not because I'm 60 days in here, and I'm trying to use this experience to not do this time, but very much the idea of kind of settling in first and then sort of trying to impact things. I left it too long in my last place to kind of, I think you have a window almost, without being like scary, but you have a window of where you're the new person, you can do this and almost set your stall out. And I think the last place was a little bit kind of, I didn't want to upset the apple cart too much or demand too much to begin with. And I think that was I then saw the next commercial director come in, and he just came in and just went like ball in a china shop, just went after everything, right? And it was like telling people, and I looked at that and thought, right, if I'd have done that when I joined, I'd have probably had more people on side. It would have been less difficult. So I'm trying to do that here where I am now. But again, I have to keep reminding myself and be like, no, this is why they've hired you. You're not, don't worry about upsetting people, etc. And yeah, so that's it for me, was like, rather not taking the time, trying to have the impact as much as possible straight away is what I'd try and do more. But echoing what you said again there, Charlotte, in interview, like there's probably a couple of questions I'd have always asked before. Hindsight's wonderful, isn't it? But like being like, have you got this, etc. Being probably not, sorry, just very quickly, probably after you've got offered the job, that's probably the time. I try to do it where I was here now. Be like, right, and almost prepare yourself for it. It'd be like, if I'd have done a bit, because I had 2 months of gardening leave and I did nothing. Right? It was wonderful, but I probably should have actually spent some more time going into the specifics of what I'm going to prepare for.
Yeah, I think you never really know, and I think, like we said, BD is such a multifaceted role. We you know what you're coming in for, you never quite know. But no, I think you guys have done a great job today, sharing some of those insights and helping people. And I think a lot you've talked about building the relationships within. I'm conscious there's a couple of questions which I will try and answer really quickly, because I think the only one, Callan, you asked about, should a BD director or senior role always be the first hire a business makes in sales or a final appointment? So, I've had this conversation with lots of people, and we do recruitment through BD Matters, and we've got that exact challenge on at the moment. I mean, yes, I would probably veer towards the senior role, but it all depends on sort of the budgets you've got, the resources you've got internally, and where that needs to work. Because if you're a smaller agency, that BD director senior role is normally the MD and CEO of the company, and they might not have the budget to take in a senior hire and an appointment setter. But there is a differentiation between the two people, and you've probably recognized this all in your own careers, is that once you start, once you've been in your career for sort of 10 years plus and you start to earn maybe 50K and beyond, you are probably less inclined to want to do lead generation. And that's true, right, for anybody. And so therefore you need people that are more senior, that are better at managing expectations of senior stakeholders, working on the positioning, working on a new business strategy, attending meetings, closing meetings and opportunities, but they might be less inclined to do lead generation and picking up the phone and cold calling. So you do need the two skill sets. And I think a lot of people, when they're hiring BD teams, they don't think about the different parts. I think you need 3 roles. One is the senior hire, one is the new business person, and one is the marketing person in some capacity to make it successful. So yeah. I'm just going to put in something into the chat just to highlight some of the stuff coming up. Hopefully there's no rude words or typos in it, but I haven't got time to check it. But we've basically got we're taking a pause on the interviews. So this is the last one. We're not doing one in August. So the next one will be in September. We've got the next monthly meetup, if you're a BD Matters member, on the 19th of July, which is also the same day as our summer party. So I don't know if you've seen the summer party, but that's in Camden in London, if you can make it. And what else we've got? We got a workshop this afternoon with Stuart Dunk, who's a procurement consultant. So if you're still space, if you want to join, if you can join in person, it's in Holborn. If you can join online, he's like ex-Danone and Nike, so he's got like great experience. That's at 2:30 today, so literally in an hour and a half. So yeah, I think that's kind of everything that BD Matters. I've dropped our creds in there as well if you want to find out more about membership. But yeah, if you've got any other questions, let me know. Thank you, Robbie. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thanks very much. We enjoyed it.
Thanks for being a part of it. And I'll see you all guys in September or at the summer party. Take care.